Hey fam, I wanted to talk a little bit more about EPF today, equal playing field, the Gyris partner, really. The reason why EPF has a 7.5% of the primary and 10% of secondary royalties is because I think we owe them a lot. You know, Papua New Guinea and my journey with equal playing field is for a lot of reasons, responsible, or at least in part, for Gyris. I take a lot of inspiration, locations, ideas, and just generally, I think when you have such a creative endeavor, it has to, or at least one like this, it has a lot of yourself in it. And Papua New Guinea has been a big part of my life for over a decade now. So Jackie and I, we met in India. I was representing Australia and she was representing Papua New Guinea as youth leaders, for the work that we'd done previously in other things. And it just so happened that I'd been doing postgrad international health. I'd been doing a master's, and I'd been studying Papua New Guinea. I chose Papua New Guinea as the country I wanted to study for a random reason. Fucking who knows why? I'd never thought about Papua New Guinea before this, so I don't know why I did. And I was learning about HIV and STI prevalence and the relation of that to physical and sexual violence. And so I remember making recommendations on this essay that, Papua New Guinea is crazy for sport. Like, they should really be using sport as a vehicle for development a lot more. And then, months later, I'm sitting there across from Papua New Guinea, and the first that I ever remember meeting, and I was like, oh yeah, I've been doing some research. We should do this thing. I was 23 years old. It's the type of thing you say randomly, as if you could just pluck something like that out of the air and create something in another country. But that's kind of how it started. And months later, Jackie had thought I'd fallen off the face of the earth, but I'd been busy looking for a model that could possibly work in Papua New Guinea from the small amount that I knew. Then, as I mentioned in a previous video, I set up a concert with some cool bands, and we raised $4,000 and headed over to PNG and lived in communities and learned as much as I could. Started building relationships with the services that did exist. But what we found is that there was virtually zero prevention activities for violence against women, and later, we learned children as well. Yet these are there's nowhere in the world outside of a war zone that has had worse levels or higher levels of violence against women and children than Papua New Guinea. Over the years, the stories that Jackie and I have heard are beyond what you could imagine as a father. Really, really horrific stuff. And and we looked at a landscape. The idea was to create a project around prevention, and originally it was just going to be started for adults. It was meant to be targeted at adults, and we realised really quickly that there was this that if we wanted to change the face of the nation, and for the next generations, that we'd really need to focus on young people. So we changed our tactics along the way, and started really the bulk of our activities aimed at these early adolescents, trying to really promote gender equality, and respect between the sexes at a younger age, have them playing respectfully with each other. Now, I mean, my team will know and my community will know. I mean, at Gyris, we're nearly all male. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with men being with men, but the importance of being able to interact with women and have relationships and respect for them is super important. And when you don't, build that into your communities, you have devastating consequences. Now, there's arguments as to whether this is a consequence of colonization, or whether it's truly part of PNG's culture. That there's people on either side of that. None of that really fucking matters. What matters is making sure that women and children can grow up in families and communities where they aren't abused and they can live good lives. So, I mean, one of the early inspirations for the organisation was a woman called Joy Watovo, who I would consider a friend. I sat with her in the early days of EPF. We used to be called Rugby League Against Violence, but changed that name. And she told me the story of her years of abuse at the hands of her husband, who tried to kill her on multiple occasions in front of her children. The final time she went to, he was a police officer. The final time she went to the press because the police wouldn't do anything, and that's finally when he fled. And he was never brought to justice. That was one of the early stories. That was horrific. She was burned with an iron and stabbed, and Then, years later, we're trying to, PNG was listed as the only place where violence was is considered an epidemic. So Médecins Sans Frontières, they only go into countries where there's epidemics. Now, PNG was this strange outlier where they sent teams to set up these services, these family support centres, for the huge amount of women facing violence, both for physical care and for psychosocial support. Now, they saw the level of violence there against women and children to be so large that they made that choice that it wasn't tuberculosis or polio or something that there was an outbreak of, or HIV that they had to go and be a part of, but violence itself and the effects of that. Some of their reports are horrific. Tari is a place where we've done a little bit of work, and we're now setting up more of a. I actually just hopped off an email, which is what actually inspired me to hop on and do this, because when I read things from my team about what we're planning to do, it fills me with a sense of pride and energy. The Tari is in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, which is a region that has a series of, a bunch of provinces in it. And Tari is notorious for burning women at the stake. In modern times, we're talking about like now, women being tied up and burned for what they see as sorcery. Stories of a 7-year-old girl being gang raped on the side of a road and being taken to one of these centres. These types of things are too common, actually, and to be honest, it's not just Papua New Guinea. These types of things are too common everywhere, but Papua New Guinea hasn't had the support in many ways for these women and children, or for the services that have tried to set up. So the email I just received, I know I'm going all over the place, you guys are used to it, but the email I received just before was from my co-founder Jackie, and she's talking about there's this increasing amount of orphans at these orphanages, not wanted by the communities. They could be unwanted kids, or they can be a product of rape, or mother has died through violence. These kids are suffering massive amounts of trauma, and there is virtually zero, you might as well say zero, psychosocial support, so mental health support for children at all in the country, and certainly not the specialised support for traumatised kids, nor is there for women. There is there's some psychosocial support for women who have been victims of sexual and family violence or domestic violence, but it's very minimal, and it's in these support centres, and it's not enough. So we're looking at right now at funding a team in the Highlands to really help with like policy and training of staff at medical facilities, working with the support centre to give them added support. Really hoping to get some practical psychosocial, so mental health support for kids in the country, something we've been talking about for a long time. I mean, ultimately, we want to be in a place where we can have our own safe houses and protect and help to raise kids. Each step of the way of EPF, I guess this is where I was getting to with this. We went into a space, idealistic and young, but very quickly learned that there was no one doing something that was desperately needed. And so we became really the first prevention-focused organisation, and we started, developing and delivering these school-based respectful relationship education programs as a means to shift the future of that generation. We then realised that it was that none of these teachers had child protection training at all. So teachers coming out of teacher training, where you'd learn to become a teacher, had never been taught child protection. Crazy, right? These are the people that are best placed outside of parents to support these kids, and so very often they were the purveyors of violence themselves. Still quite a lot of, including a head teacher in a major school in Port Moresby, the capital, known for corporal punishment. Lots of issues of sexual abuse from teachers, being moved around. Lots of the type of shit that you heard about in the past of Australia that happens when you don't have robust systems of protection, because predators find their way into these systems. So we started working on teacher training, and after a while we realized, well, that's not good enough. We need system level change. So in the early days we're just a couple of volunteers, and we worked as volunteers for quite some time, and then we worked for a pittance for quite some time after that, and then all of this work was being done because we saw a need, and we knew we needed to do it, but and we knew we needed to do it without having the means to pay for it at the time. Yeah, we kept building and we kept growing, and those things came. We realised that we needed a system level change, so we thought, well, let's forget just training the teachers in schools. We need to go to the source. So we have we've worked with, I think, 6 of the 12 teacher training institutions in the country, and should work with the remaining, or at least another 5 in the next year. So essentially we're working to train and build the policies of every teacher training institution in the country. So every new teacher that comes through those institutions should be trained in child protection. That's fucking huge, you know. And again, that was looking at a need and just that no one else was doing it. So we took it upon ourselves to build those systems and that expertise within the organisation. We saw that schools, you know, they needed a framework to support kids and teachers. So we developed the Safe Schools framework, which is a whole of school approach for dealing with violence against children, violence against women as well, but mainly safeguard children against abuse, both in the school and out of the school, and create referral pathways. We worked with, you know, that all that work is ongoing. You know, this is ongoing. This is really hard stuff to make happen. But we're in a shit ton of schools now with the early phases of that. We were the first to be accredited to deliver the government's child protection regulations training, and we were the first to be acknowledged, organisation to be acknowledged as a part of the process of what's called the Teacher Services Commission, so that we can investigate potential criminal, you know, sexual abuse or physical abuse of kids from teachers, and make recommendations for their removal. Also putting us in a place where we can have a bit of a closer eye on, you know, what's happening with these teachers, because right now there's heaps of loopholes where they can slip out of one and pop up at another province. There's many cases where abusers of multiple children have popped up somewhere else to do it, to do the same thing somewhere else. A bunch of this big stuff where we haven't been funded for, and we just do it, such as the passion of the Equal Playing Field staff. It has been a very large weight for Jackie and I and for the staff to carry for many years, but the feeling you get from something so important, I think that's, you know, all that's part of the meaning of life, you know. Yeah, so that's a bit about EPF and what we do and why we do it. I mean, we're actually so much more than that. We a big part of what we want to do with Gyris is actually support Bougainville's post-conflict. You know, it's effectively a civil war of sorts. You know, Papua New Guinean mainland forces against, let's say, rebels fighting for their freedoms many years ago over a mine in Bougainville. It's quite complex, but I'll just leave it fairly simple. But that conflict ended up, you know, engulfing all of Bougainville, which is a series of islands, but 2 major islands. And for 10 years, you know, kids wouldn't go to school. They missed out on a lot of education. Churches were shut down, many lives lost. The effects of that for Bougainville are still felt massively now. One of the most special, beautiful places you could imagine. Again, it has inspired a ton of Gyris, and yet, you know, it's like the unemployment rates are in the high 90s for youth. there's this, this generation that missed out on the learning and development, missed out on the kind of proper development of a human because they were in conflict. We had a staff member there that he went back to kindergarten when he was 13, and he Martin, he grew up to be a really impressive individual, really passionate. And there's actually a lot like that. That became our staff that we had to let go after trying to keep them for so long because we ran out of funding there. It's not a politically easy place to fund, very difficult actually to provide support to. But these young people, when given the opportunity, we created Generation Found, a program over there that was all about personal development and community development. And it was starting from self and, learning to breathe, learning to exercise, in all honesty, very Jordan Peterson inspired, clean up your room type stuff, mixed with all of the community development stuff that we're about. So, let's sort out yourself first. Let's start eating right, let's start sleeping, let's get rid of all this kind of shitty ways that we communicate and behave. And then let's see if we can help people. So we would take them through personal development, and then we would guide them through like community actions, and they were, creating groups of youth, starting farming to generate their own income. They were cleaning up their local areas. They were supporting widows. All sorts of really beautiful stuff. We started a great little youth movement there before we basically had to shut down without enough funding. There is no end to the things that can be done in a place like Papua New Guinea. And Equal Playing Field's always looking for those places where we can be most effective. So I could talk forever. I've already talked for a long time about it, but if anyone ever has any questions, just throw them over. EPF is a lot like Gyris in that we do so much, and we don't always. We do more. It's more about the action than the talking. We've got a lot going on, and we don't always communicate it really well. But EPF is a great example of, we've been going for a decade and we continue to grow. We continue to grow in influence and in size and the support we give for people. And, we've over the years, there's actually some really interesting parallels, because over the years, like, we would see different organizations come in and bigger ones even, and clearly take our ideas, and get a bit of steam and get a bit of something behind them. And we always, we would have our moments of upset, and we just knew that we just keep building, we just keep doing what we're doing. And, a lot of the times you see those, the hype, or those that manage to say all the right things to get this little pocket of funding over here, or in the case of Gyris, it's really easy for shitty projects to get hype sometimes. What seems easy for them. And then when you just remember that you're building something awesome, and you just continue eyes front, you can make something really fucking great. So, as I've said before, EPF's, I owe EPF a lot. We wouldn't be here without them. So I love that we're donating. We're soon going to become the largest donation in the history of EPF from outside of a government or a large source like that. The biggest ever was 100,000 kina from a corporate. So as a community, we will be the largest donor for EPF very soon. and we'll be doing some fucking crazy shit. So with that money, so you guys rock.